Hi, I'm Scott Elliott. I'm the artistic director of the new group, and I want to say welcome to everybody who's watching on Facebook Live today. This is our Why We Do It series. It's brand new, and it's a series that asks, why do we create, how do we create, and where do our artistic impulses come from, and how do we continue to remain open to following them? So when I founded the new group about 25 years ago, it was an artist-driven company. And over our history, I've built a lot of close relationships with artists that have worked with us. And for this series, I'm going to sit down every week with a new group artist to talk to them about their practice and process and share some stories from the projects we've worked on together. Obviously, this is a new thing for us. It's it's like I went from being a producer and a director of theater overnight to being an online content producer and now a talk show host, it seems. So we're happy to bring this to you free on Facebook Live, but obviously it's a tough time for all nonprofit theaters, and we're all struggling to stay alive through this crisis, and there are a few ways that you can support us. We're accepting donations on our website at www.thenewgroup.org, or even better, after each one of these series, we're going to have a virtual cocktail hour with me and the artist, and tonight, of course, it's Cynthia. And you'll be able to have some quality time having a cocktail with us and get your questions answered. And, I think the conversation will be a little juicier maybe during that section because it costs money to come. So you can go onto our, you can pay for that. That's $100, but you get to hang out with me and Cynthia. And with that, I'd like to welcome the first guest of the series, artist, activist, and new group board member, Cynthia Nixon. How you doing, Cynthia? Ooh, I can't hear you.
Oh,
there, I hear you again. I do.
Can you see me?
And now I'm trying to figure out how to, oh, there you are. Much better. How you doing?
Okay. I'm okay. I don't see myself, which is not a disaster. I will just say that the banner is still up on my screen, and there I am.
Technical difficulties, first time in. We're theater producers. We're not producers of this normally, but here we are. We find ourselves doing this, and we've learned about it. And you're our guinea pig, Cynthia, as usual.
Delighted to be. Delighted.
Well, anyway, here we are.
I make a guinea pig noise, but I'm not sure. Oink, oink, squeak, squeak. I'm not sure what they say. All
of it. But I think that it's so interesting because here we are in our apartments in New York. Well, I guess what used to be New York City. It's a bit of a shell of New York City right now. And I guess our goal in these conversations is to continue enlightening and entertaining in any way that we can and to keep people engaged in the work that we do. So I'm going to just dive in and ask you some questions, and then let's see where we go.
Okay,
so
cool.
As long as I've known you, which is a pretty long time, I think I knew you before I actually knew you, because when I first started the company and I started to go out and see a lot of theater, I would see you all the time at it seemed like every show I went to, you were at with your mother, your great mother, your late great mother.
Yes.
And I just would marvel at the fact that you have been in the theater for such a long time. How old were you when you did your first play?
When I did my first play, I started in film and TV before, which is less usual. But when I did my first play, I was 14. Right.
And so you've been doing it a really long time.
Right. So I'm 54 this year.
Oh, wow.
I was 54 last month. So I guess that's 40 years in the theater, and then another, maybe 2 or 3 in film. So, yeah.
Amazing. So how did you become obsessed with the theater at such a young age? I mean, obviously we all get obsessed with it in some way in such a young age, but you were so obsessed with it that you actually did it.
Right.
So how did that happen? Like what went on in your house?
So, I mean, I think that there are kids who find their way to the theater. A lot of us find their way to musicals through our albums. There used to be albums. But I think many of us find our way to the theater because we have a family member that takes us, right, when we're little, and we get excited
Yes.
about it. And so for me, that was absolutely my mother. And she had been an actress before I was born, and she went to Yale Drama School, and she studied with Uta Hagen, and she tried to be an actress for like 15 years with really not any luck. And so then she decided she would get a desk job and have a kid. But for her, taking me to the theater was more than just like a fun activity. It was like a passion. It was I think an addiction is a fair thing to call it. So, she was taking me to Hamlet when I was like 6, right? I Stacy Keach as Claudius, or as Hamlet, and James Earl Jones as Claudius. And I remember these things. And I think that the important thing she would do was, of course, it was really fun, even though she would take me to things, sometimes like Citizen Kane that were a little, not really from my age range. But what was really fun also was we would dissect it afterward. And we would say, what worked, but even more interestingly, what didn't work and why didn't it work? And if we were the director, producer, writer of this play or movie or TV show, whatever it was, how could we have fixed it? And my mother always used to say that you can learn about making theater much better from a disastrous production that you see, or even horribly might be a part of, than you can for something that's great. Because when something is like great, it's literally seamless. You can't see the seams. You can't see how it's made. You just see the majesty. But when something is not working, it's like it exposes the spine of it, and you see, oh, well, we're missing some vertebrae here, and this is what these people should have done.
Wow, you're lucky. That's very lucky that you had that experience. Are we having some sort of technical difficulty that I'm not aware of? I'm seeing some texts from our producer.
I'm talking to Sharifa, and she says, oh, I guess it hasn't started yet.
Oh, are we okay, Leandro? What's happening?
We're working on getting our Facebook Live back up.
Facebook Live.
We're working on getting our Facebook Live back up. So
okay, should we continue?
Pause for just a minute.
Okay.
Okay, we're pausing for just a minute.
That's what they say in sports.
Yeah. I'm trying to. There it is. Well.
Sharifa says it keeps crashing.
Oh. That's not good. Mm-hmm.
Oink, oink. Squeak, squeak.
Yeah. We lost folks and are now paused. Ian says fun. You guys are doing great. Shall we continue, Leandro?
Yeah, just continue. Go on and continue.
Okay, great. Okay, so I guess they're working on whatever technical difficulties are happening.
Yeah.
I just got a text from somebody said it is fine on Zoom. Okay, so we'll just continue.
Okay.
Okay, so lucky that your mother, sort of educated you through it, and in a way, it sounds like
we could say indoctrinated too. I think.
That's a good word too. But it
right?
seems like you started thinking about process, at 6 years old, which is such a fascinating. It's a fascinating thing that rather than just going and enjoying or not enjoying, you were actually dissecting and thinking about what worked and what didn't work. And I guess that was the beginning of your process. And having worked with you a couple of times, your process is very, it's so clear, and that's one of the things I love about working with you, is that it's so no nonsense that in a way you're a director's dream, because the director says what they what they're thinking, and then you digest it and you come out. There's very little nonsense in between, and sometimes people have a harder time with that. Why is that? Like, how did you come to that? Did you ever have, issues with, process or communicating in that way?
I have to. So I think a few things. One, I think that my mother, because my mother, she was born in 1930, and she was like trying to be an actress in the 50s and early 60s. And I think had she come up today, she might have been more of a director. And I feel like the thing that she was doing was actually sort of teaching me more about directing in a funny way. That was the real, and so I have to say, so because when I started directing, it sort of was a great fit, and it sort of felt like a place my head had been all the time. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I would not say I'm a person with much or maybe even any technique, right? Because my mother gave me some things. My mother gave me definitely some things, but because I was, when you're a child actor, you can get work. I mean, if you're good at all, people hire you right away because there's such a dearth, or there was when I started, of kids who want to do it and who live in a place like New York or Los Angeles where it's happening. So it was very, results oriented, because it was like it wasn't like I could spend a lot of time in an acting class sort of figuring out my process. It was like the camera's rolling, time to do it now. So I did when I was in my late 20s, when I was in, I guess I was in Angels in America, or maybe it was in Indiscretions, the play I did the year after. So I was like 28. I tried to go to acting school for the first time, and I did study with Uta Hagen for like a year, and it was great, but it was, it's kind of a little too late. So, I always think about that line, and I'm still here, she should have gone to an acting school, I should have gone to an acting school, but someone said she's sincere. And I think so much of being an actor is sincerity, right? I mean, that's the baseline. That's like, you have to believe in what you're doing. You have to pretend to be the character, and you have to believe it, and that'll get you pretty far.
That's pretty incredible to hear. I've known you a long time. I've never heard you talk about this, but it's funny because your mother was like director, because she always had thoughts, about all, when we were working together, she would always be around and have thoughts.
Yeah.
And have that sort of influence, I can't imagine how amazing that must be. It's funny because I think people that start young, because I remember Matthew Broderick, when I directed Matthew Broderick a couple of years ago, he said, oh God, I never had a process until I worked on this play. Like, he never thought about, but like I'm pretty process oriented and pretty processy. I like playing around and getting in there, and it was so fun to sort of hear that from him, and now hearing that from you about how, like, oh, I never really had a process, but I guess it's really all about instincts and impulses, and I think that's what set you apart from all of the other child actors who were trying to get in hurly-burly and the real thing at the same time, which is one of your legendary moments.
I had my mother in my back pocket, who was my secret weapon, and she would work with me.
So you had that director, she would direct you?
Well, that was the other thing, so this is weird. So first of all, she would work with me on the auditions, and then she would work with me when I had the part. And I just didn't get hired by a lot of bad directors. And I think it was
you've worked with some really good people.
Some great people right from the very beginning. I mean, like the guy who directed the first, movie I ever did, you probably haven't heard of him, Robert Maxwell. He was a great director. I worked with Ellis Rabb and Louis Malle and Mike Nichols and Robert Altman, all before I was, 20.
Amazing.
And I think it was, I was trying to keep my expectations very low. And are you okay? Do we think this is working? Do we think that people are
semi-working? I'm just looking over here. I think it's semi-working. Let's continue.
Okay.
Experiment.
So, you know, I was trying to, you know, being an actor seemed impossible. So I was trying to keep the bar really, really low. I was going to do commercials and earn money for college because my mother was like, we don't have any money for college. And basically I would audition for commercial after commercial after commercial, you know, to try and be the Crest girl. And I got a few of them, but I mostly didn't get them. Because, I mean, the flip way to say it is I was too weird, right? I kind of had too much going on here. And so when I would try and do like really, really bad copy, like commercials, or I mean, now sometimes they're more creative, but you know, you're like a salesperson selling something that you have no connection to. So it's right. And when I had been doing them for years and not getting many of them, I had a person who had put me on tape, and she said, "Come over here. I want you to see this." A casting director. She said, "Look at you. Look at how embarrassed you look. You see how embarrassed you look? That's why you don't book any of these." And so I kind of just then called my agent. I was like, "I don't want to go out on these commercials anymore." But what was happening at the same time that I wasn't booking all these commercials, right, that were my goal, is I was, you know, strange enough or interesting enough or whatever, real enough that people who had real parts, they would put me in things, you know, after school specials and movies and on Broadway plays and off Broadway plays. And I learned from the best. And I learned, of course, not only from these great directors I was working with, but also from the other actors.
Amazing. What a career. So I guess that in a way, like because of all these opportunities that you've had, and you know, obviously you had a long-running television show.
Yeah.
I was lucky to get you in the theater during that time,
Yes.
that fun show we did together, The Women. And you know, it provides some. So your addiction to the theater is what kept you coming back, right? Like because you. And also, I feel like your choice of roles. I mean, obviously, you get a million offers. And what brings you back? What is it? What is it that? Because of course, I've asked you to do a couple of things that you haven't done. So, like, what brings you back? What's the key that takes you from your great career in television and film to back on the stage, other than your addiction? What is it? What is it?
I mean, I love working with people like you. I love working with not only the actors you hire and the designers you hire, but the playwrights you hire, because I want to do theater. I want to do something that's really alive. And when theater is alive, sometimes you get a movie that's alive, or TV thing, there's such great TV now that's alive. But when something is alive and electric in the theater and people leap to their feet, I mean, there is just really nothing like that. I also, I love to be I love the audience. I love having a live audience, and I love that schedule, but I love being in a rehearsal room, almost more than anything.
Well, it's obvious in working with you. It's
right?
obvious that you are a rehearsal addict as well, which makes it so fun for people like me.
Right. And so, I mean, I feel like, again, I sort of miss the beginning of my career. I miss the part where you're in school and you learn and you experiment. I missed it. So I'm always wanting it, right? Rather than to just leap to the results part. Because so much of showing up in a movie set or a TV, is like you're supposed to have memorized all your lines and know what you're doing, and then they just start the camera. But the fun part is experimenting with other people who are really skilled, and trying the stuff that, throwing the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, and trying the stuff that's terrible and you would never, put it in front of an audience, but because you did the embarrassing, bold thing, you learn something from that you can make into something wonderful.
Yeah, I feel that way too about rehearsals. Like I actually go through a little bit of a depression when rehearsals are over because
Yes.
I find the experience of being in a room together with a group of artists so incredible to be able to experiment, as you say, and you know play around, fantasize, all those sorts of things. I guess that's something that um, is a little sad about our moment right now is that we can't do that. Any thoughts about that? I've been thinking about it an awful lot. Obviously, I run a theater company and I'm a theater director, and I keep thinking, oh my God, when am I gonna be in that situation again, and when am I gonna have those feelings again? That's what I'm addicted to. Do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Two things. One is I feel like also, of course, it's terrifying when you leave the rehearsal room and you get in front of an audience and the director goes away. I mean, I always feel like it's a kind of little death, right? It's
Yeah,
it's
it
sort
is.
of like leaving home, and of course you're excited to like be a grown up now and go out on your own, and it's scary, but it's like the death of a parent, like when the director sort of begins to pull back. And one thing I've been thinking about is, of course, I'm connected to people all across the country and they have different experiences. But of the people that I know here in New York and in New York City specifically, I feel like the people that I know in the theater know so many more people who have been sick
Hmm.
and really sick or even who have died. And it's kind of disproportionate when you look at my other friends who are not in the theater. And I think it's because we are so communal, and it's
Totally.
our job is
We're
to
spitting
have,
on each other.
right, and we're very physical with each other, and we're in
Yeah.
plays and rehearsals, and we're right. And so it is particularly hard to be separated in our own, like, look at you and I talking, but like
I
you're
know
in
it's so
your box
weird.
and I'm in my box,
I
literally.
know. It's great to see your face, but it's the weirdest thing. I
I
can't
know.
touch you. I want to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
It makes it. This is the longest single conversation I've had on one of these things. I'm on these meetings all day, obviously, because this is the new thing. This is how we're dealing with everything. But this one-on-one thing is so interesting because I just want to hug you.
yeah.
It's sort of a weird thing. Did you happen to read that article in the New York Times today about how they're trying to get rehearsing again in Germany and Austria? It's
No,
fascinating. I mean, it's a depressing article. I mean, they're trying to keep distance and wear masks, and the directors are freaking out, and it's not making any sense. I think even in the headline it says that people are calling it cuckoo, that the government would suggest that people might go to work in our industry like that,
yeah.
not completely not understanding like what it's about. We can't socially distance and do our work. It's not who we are. So I guess we just have to pray that this goes away quickly, so that we can, or there's some sort of solution, and we can sort of get back to business. But that said, this is a fun substitute, so let's continue. So when you always tell that funny story about when I asked you to be a director, when we were doing that reading together of Women Behind Bars with you and Rosie O'Donnell
Yes.
and Tasha and Hallie Pfeiffer. It was such a fun reading. And then
Yeah.
tell that story. It's such a good one.
So we were doing this reading of this funny, campy play about women in prison. It's called Women Behind Bars, and it's very campy. And I don't know. I guess so. You were telling us what to do, and there was a big cast. It was like 12 of us or 15 of us or something. And you were telling us what to do, and I was like bickering with you about it. Like, really, we have to stand up? Can't we sit at our stools with our things? We have to stand up every time and you said, why don't you direct the play next year, the reading next year for the benefit? And I said, and you said, because you're already directing this one now. And it was like you to a T, because it was so funny and it was so true, and it served to basically like shut me up a little bit, but it basically was like, I see you, and what you're doing, you're misbehaving, but the way in which you're misbehaving, we're going to do something with this. We're going to make it into something.
Yeah, exactly. Because I hate directing readings, quite frankly, and so I was so happy that you had some ideas about it. But I do it. It's part of what we do. It's not normally the thing that I love. But then right after that, we found a play, and you did was Enter Laughing? Was that the first one that we did together?
We did Little
Murders.
Murders.
Little Murders, right? That's what I meant, right? Little Murders. That's
great.
A great reading.
Right.
And then after that,
America Ferrera and Michael Stuhlbarg.
That was a great reading.
Great reading.
And you did a great job directing it. And then after that, was that when I gave you Rashida Speaking? Right after that to look at.
I think we looked for a bit and we read some plays and then.
Oh right.
Right. And that's I think we even considered Steve at that point, or maybe not. I can't remember. But yeah, you were like, here it is. This is the play. It's contained. It's 4 people. The script is finished. Almost nothing has to happen to the script, and it's one of the things I really appreciated, other than it being really meaty, and being every part in that play was a great part, and two tremendous parts for 2 women over 40. But also it's an office, so people come in, they take off their coat, they sit down at their desk. It wasn't like there were a lot of dance numbers or, enormous. It wasn't like dinner at 8 with like 12 people like coming through that you have to do fancy, fancy staging with, because that was particularly terrifying.
Yeah, but what you did that was so great in that production was the way, it's a different kind of directing, the directing that I prefer, which is less about, door slamming and entrances and exits, but you managed to sustain a tension in the production, which was really what the play called for, and which is why I gave the play to you, because I thought, an actor would really understand the tension of this play, and you did. And so that play, every time I watched it, I was like, here, because of the tension. Obviously, we had those titanic performances from those women. But Tanya Pinkins and Diane Wiest, I mean, not terrible
to
have your first play.
Yeah.
But I mean, they help. But you really maintain that. Is that something that you thought about, or is that something that or did that just come naturally because of your great acting instincts?
I think that those women understood so well, not only the text but the subtext, and I think Joel Johnson, the playwright, did such a tremendous job of, it was almost like a symphony. Like you could tell, here is the tension, and then there's a breath, and then the tension starts up again. It's not like Pinter, but it's almost like that in a way. That's the level of everybody holding their breath.
But it did feel like a Pinter play in some ways in that production.
Yeah.
I felt.
Yeah.
And then after that, I played into your your love of the theater and musicals by handing you Steve, and I wasn't sure whether it was going to be something that you were going to like or not like, but you really took to that script, and completely different than Rashida Speaking.
Yeah.
Completely different, and with that fun musical element to it, and a great comedy, but also human and emotional, and what attracted you to that one?
Well, I love Shakespeare, and I love Ibsen and Chekhov and all those folks, but I love musical comedy probably more. And I feel like Mark Gerard, who wrote Steve, he and I are kind of the same person, I feel, in a funny way. We're kind of,
a little bit.
we're queer. We were brought up by kind of lefty parents, and we think in musical comedy, and so it just seemed a natural extension of I don't know, like if I was much cleverer and wittier, like Mark is in real life and on the page, particularly, that's the play that I would write. So what was really fun and exciting was to put it on with those amazing actors and to, put all that music in it, which is what you encouraged me to do, which terrified me, but boy, was it great. And see how many of us are there out there that also kind of think in musical comedy. The way as if the Bible is your holy text, and everything that happens in your life you relate it to some biblical story that lives in you. Sondheim is that for me, and Mark Gerard, and Rodgers and Hammerstein and Jerome Kern and everybody else too. Yeah. And
Yeah,
it was also a great play because it was really about the moment that we are in as the queer community, having come so far, having lived through the AIDS epidemic, and it's of course morphed into something else now. It's still with us, but it's not like it was in the 80s. But also with marriage equality having happened, and people making such different choices to get married, to not get married, to have children, to be in multiple relationships, to be celibate, to be all these different things, and sort of a wealth of choices and yet why do we feel stuck? It's like,
it's like that weird wrestling with normalcy. It's like that was the thing that I loved about that play, is that there was a wrestle with what's normal, what's a normal relationship, a normal marriage, and gay people sort of wrestling with that, referencing musical theater the whole time, which I found completely charming and touching, actually. That play was very moving to me every time I watched it.
It's also about middle age, right? It's about the people are middle-aged. The LGBT movement is middle-aged, and we were so, particularly there's one lesbian, and it's mostly about gay men. It's like when your whole thing is about being young and hot, and now you're 40, 50, whatever, who are you now? And what are you about?
And so you don't really do that many plays, but when you went back to acting after directing, what was that like? That must have been interesting. What play is Little Foxes all you did after directing?
No, I did a play with Giovanni in Williamstown.
Oh, right.
Right. And it was really interesting. That was, I think, the first play that I did.
What was that called?
I wish I could remember what it was called. It was Carrie Perloff wrote it, and it was a 3-character play based on Phaedra.
Right.
And yeah, it was true. I have done little things with Giovanni before, like readings and workshops and things, but I eyed her like a hawk now, because it's like how you view your parents differently after you've had a child, and you always knew that, they were, impressive in a whole bunch of ways, but now you just see it like for what it is. And I guess, I don't know, for me though, the one of the most interesting things that I learned is, it relates back to what we were talking about at the beginning, which is, my technique or lack of it just means like I talk to the director and we agree, and then I try and do it, right? And there are many actors that I know who have all this process, and they don't want the director to get in there too early, because they feel like it cuts their process off before it even can lift off.
Oh yeah, I've worked with people like that. It's annoying.
Yeah, but
it's a collaboration.
Okay, but there are those genius acts, I never worked with Phil. I know you knew, Philip Seymour Hoffman, but he must have been sort of like that, mustn't he?
I never directed him in a production. I only directed him in readings and things like that. But I think that the thing about Phil, don't want to speak for him, obviously, was that he just never suffered fools. Do you know what I mean? And if he felt that that it wasn't, because obviously in every profession, there's chemistry. You have chemistries with people, and in ours particularly, because we're telling stories about people and we have to enact them. And we have to pretend we're other people. And I think with Phil, Phil was, in a way, he was like you. He was no nonsense. He liked to talk about everything, and he did his thing. He didn't, he didn't.
But I'm sure that there is, like, you can tell from his performances, I'm sure there's a lot that he kept to himself and would not say out loud. It would not say the director, would not say to the other actors. And I guess that's the main.
Well, he was the director too, obviously. He directed some great plays.
Right. But I think that one of the things that I learned going back and forth between being an actor and being a director is what I want from a director isn't necessarily what all my actors want, right? I almost can't have enough dialogue with a director, right? And there really are a number of actors who are some of the most brilliant actors, I think, that need to be they need to marinate, right? It can't just be like, can you have that chicken ready in an hour? They're like, no, I have to marinate it for for 3 days, And I feel like that's one of the important things that you said to me, like, really early, like, because I have I learned from Mike Nichols, and he has millions and millions and millions of notes, but you were like, you need to let them do a run through and not say a word to them before it. Don't give them any more things to be thinking about in their head. They have the 5 million things you've already given them to be thinking about. Don't load on another 2,000.
Yeah, well, it's about trust, right? Like that's how I always look at it. Like, you pick your casts, we pick our casts as directors, and we have to trust them, because in a way, when we, like you say before, like when we go away, they have to feel that we trust them, so that they can continue to explore and make the play better and better as they go along. But it's funny that you brought up Phil, because it's almost like you read my mind, because I was thinking about you and Laura Linney and the Little Foxes, and the way that you guys, and how Phil and John Riley flipped in True West, and then you guys, you did your version of it, very different play in Little Foxes, and that must have been an interesting rehearsal experience. Rehearsing both of those roles so different. But like True West, those guys are really different. But like, what was that like? Give me a little insight into like how you were able to sort of do 2 roles at the same time, and then do it so well that you won the Tony Award.
Well, first of all, I can't even believe that Laura, gave me that opportunity. And there's the crazy story about how that came to be, which is crazy.
I know. I had lunch with you, or I remember we had like lunch or breakfast the day you were thinking of doing it, that she called you.
Crazy. The thing that's different, though, about,
by the way, I was like, "Are you crazy? Pick one."
Right. About True West that's a 2-character play.
Yeah.
And those guys, they are each other's acting partners. The thing about those 2 parts, Regina and Bertie, they barely interact. So in some ways, I don't know, maybe that's harder. I mean, the thing that was so excruciating is to, you feel so vulnerable in rehearsal. You think, oh, I'm terrible. I'm the worst actor that ever was. They're going to fire me any minute. Like every actor thinks this. And then to have this tremendous actress that you respect and revere, then do the same scene that you just did, and in your mind, like, get it out of the ballpark when you just made every wrong fake choice, It was really, really, really hard.
I bet. It looked hard. It was a very big show.
Hard. It was a
really big show.
And it was hard. It was just hard, but it was exciting. And then of course also, we actors are very, very mercenary, very like needing our little treats and our little laughs and our little whatever. And, if the person did the part that you did the night before and they got all these laughs and you hadn't, or they got exit applause and you hadn't, it's very,
right. I didn't even think of that. But
right?
Yeah, that weird competition thing that could happen.
Right.
That is so crazy. Okay, so one more question, and then I think we have to like wrap up this part and get ready to get our cocktails and let our hair down a little bit. I don't have any hair, but I'll take my hat off maybe. So obviously your politics has been so much, and your politics as your activism is so incredible. The way that you've sort of like stepped up in that way. Obviously I was following you all through your run, and and just thought the things that you were doing and saying, just I felt so aligned with. So how do you see in any way that coming into your theater life, or like are you interested, like the political theater, like is that something that you because that's not normally your thing, but although you did direct that one woman show, but that wasn't really
right.
political real, but has your taste changed? Like like what do you want to do next in the theater? Like are you influenced by your politics and the things that you think that you want to do, and how do you see your next move in the theater?
Oh, well, so I feel like those are two separate questions. Like,
okay.
Well, okay. So the first thing is like, I love political theater. I love Brecht. I love Clifford Odets. I love The Cradle Will Rock, even though maybe it's not the best.
I just reread Waiting for Lefty just for the hell of it. My agent. It was fascinating to read, because that was done, around the Depression, when everything was terrible. Just sort of lived this moment, I guess.
Right.
Our own depression.
I mean, I like agitprop because I feel like I love to go see agitprop that reinforces what I think and have me get all But I have to say, even though I like it as an audience member, I don't really want to be in it.
Yeah, I hear you.
Because I don't think it's the best, It's kind of like, I like Wonder Woman. Like, I loved her when I was a kid. She inspired me. I don't want to, not that anyone would ever cast me, but I don't want to play.
I'd cast you.
I don't want to play Wonder Woman because she's boring and two-dimensional.
I hear you.
Right? I want to, like, that's the thing about what's so great about the characters on Sex and the City, and Carrie in particular. She was like a heroine, a feminist hero, but she made terrible, terrible mistakes and terrible choices all the time. So I feel like the thing that I'm really interested in the theater and in film and everything is to present complicated, confusing characters and complicated, confusing stories that it's not so easy to judge either at the beginning or even at the end who was right and who was wrong and who was good and who was bad. Whereas, in politics, I think you kind of have to take that shortcut sometimes. Like, this is the good guy, this is the bad guy, and that a lot of political speak is that, and it needs to be, because you're asking people not to consider the complexities of humanity, but you're asking people to make a choice. Like, this is a good one, choose this one. This is a bad one, stay away. And so
okay, keep going.
And so when you ask me what I want to do in the theater, like I never have an idea about what I want to do, which is a kind of a blessing, I guess. And maybe it comes from being an actor, because we just sit and wait in a box till someone opens up the box and takes us out, right? But it is interesting that the first role that I did after I ran for governor was for Ryan Murphy, playing opposite Sarah Paulson, and playing a politico, a person who worked for the governor of California in the late 1940s, and so obviously my having not only been politically active, but actually being a person who ran for office. He cast me very much in this character that was a person who worked for the governor and had political ambitions of her own, as unrealistic as they might have been for that character, who was a woman and a lesbian in post-World War II America.
Well, that's that Nurse Ratched series.
Right, it's called Ratched.
Right. When is that going to come on, that Nurse Ratched?
September, yeah.
That sounds so scary, what you told me about it. I find it really scary.
Yeah, very scary things happen in it.
But anyway, I love what you said about what, the shows that what you look for, and because it's the same thing that I look for, and I think that's why you're so perfect as a new group, a leader in our company. Anyway, I'm going to say thank you to you for this part.